All right, hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Doug Burkott. I'm the Director of Enterprise IT Portfolio Management at the School. And this session is in conjunction with the Austin Project Management Institute. And Greg Spehar is the one that's I've been working with on lining up some really excellent speakers, including, if I should say so. I've reviewed this presentation. It's very entertaining and it's very topical. It kind of carries on a theme that we've been going through of waterfall versus agile, different tools and techniques. So before we get started, let me just do a quick intro. So Greg has been managing projects for over 20 years as a senior project manager and as a senior program manager. He has a solid background in systems design, testing, systems implementation, release, version control, and training. Some of the industries he has worked in include healthcare, insurance, banking, technology, and consulting. So Greg, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, today we're going to kind of go through and look at different ways within the healthcare industry we want to approach projects, either from waterfall or agile. It turns out there is a distinct difference, and we'll kind of go through that. Let's see if I can get my thing to go. So the challenge basically is that what we're seeing out there is in today's business climate, the program managers are being asked to choose between waterfall or agile. And we have a couple here. The options sometimes are not clear. Waterfall, agile, we'll touch upon hybrid as well, but we wanted to kind of keep things clean for the conversation. We'll talk a little bit about the need. We'll kind of look at a framework. Of course, you could come up with your own framework, but we'll provide one that can maybe get you started. And then we'll take a look at a couple use cases in which it's pretty clear, you know, one is waterfall and one is agile. And finally, technology. Technology is always an important factor. We'll take a look at MS Teams, Smartsheet, and we'll actually touch upon Spehar and that product as well. So the challenge then within what we're trying to find here is technologies as well as process, and Smartsheet has some really great ways and tools to do it. They talk about there's different methods in the world of project management. Most of us have grown up, or a lot of us have grown up with the waterfall, and as of the last 10 years, Agile has really become part of that set of tools that we have as project managers. Even CIO, right product management methodology for the job is essential. Our guide to evaluating project management methodologies will ensure help you make the perfect fit. And we'll provide this presentation after so that you can follow links and look at some of the research we did. And one of the things we're finding specifically in digital project management is really the use of Agile. And there's ways that people look at that as well. So there's a lot of literature out there that talk about this, this conundrum or this issue that we have to deal with, to the point where it makes us pull our hair out. So what are the options? So basically we're looking at primarily Agile, all waterfall. We know that there's a hybrid approach, but that's maybe for another time, another talk. We can look at what it means to do a hybrid. But more or less Agile is the continuous cycles, small, high functioning collaborative teams that deliver often, that use a continuous integration, continuous customer involvement. Whereas maybe the waterfall is going to be sequential, kind of have things all up front, and we'll be working hard to do everything in a flow there, as you can see: requirements, design, implementation, verification, and maintenance. And of course, whatever method we take, you know, the customer asks for estimates, and they'll probably treat those estimates as deadlines. That's part of our situation as project managers. It's one of the more funny moments in the movies industry. Waterfall. So in the waterfall situation, we really want to be able to look at, you know, what are our requirements. We go from a full set of requirements to a full design, and then we proceed into implementation, and then we verify that what we've built is actually in designed is actually what created, and then we go into maintenance mode. And through this waterfall approach, we really rely on Gantt charts. And so, you know, there's I think a lot of people that do this work, and they like to say, you know, come to the dark side, we have Gantt charts. On the Agile side, when we do work there, we're looking at a cycle. You'll see here that we have this notion of creating requirements, gathering and doing some design, doing the development, QA and deploy. If the product is small enough, we can do all that stuff in one sprint. If not, sometimes we can break that up, but we can talk about that another time. And one of the things about Agile that's interesting is that a lot of times the stories are not as complete as we like them, or we have to kind of make things up to get to a complete story. And in the points themselves, especially early on, we're not entirely sure how the point system works. So it's kind of like the game show that we have where the stories are made up and the points don't matter. So let's talk a little bit about the framework. You know, can we build a framework that will allow us or help us make a decision? We can show our shareholders and our stakeholders and the people that we report to our analysis so that we can make those decisions. So really, we came up with a couple categories: requirements, customer, speed, management, dependencies, team, market, and risk. Within the waterfall realm, we really have a situation, we should have a situation if we're going to do waterfall, where requirements are clear and settled, where we have customer preference, where they want to see all requirements and set those requirements and then see results. In the speed time, we're looking at quality over speed. So mostly in waterfall projects, we're looking to see everything done, and we want a particular product, and speed is not of ultimate concern. Under management, management would desire more metrics, Gantt charts, for example. So we have a lot of different metrics that we would use to manage and monitor what we're doing. A lot of times under the waterfall, we have a situation where there's a lot of dependencies. With a lot of dependencies, we may want to have that as a waterfall to manage those dependencies more clearly. Also, a lot of times within the waterfall approach, the team itself really only know one role. Typically, you might see this in a house. If you're building a house, there's certain carpenters, plumbers, electricians. They don't do each other's jobs. They keep to their own job. Another item, market. So a lot of cases within a waterfall approach, there's not really market pressures that we might see where things would change over time. So we pretty much know what we're going to build. When we build it, it's not really going to change for many years, and so on. Finally, risks. One of the things that maybe we do with waterfall, because we're building everything in a particular flow, we can manage our risks. Within healthcare, those might be compliance risk, safety risks, and it's important that some of those things be done ahead of time. On the Agile side, we're looking at requirements where requirements may be uncertain. We're not really clear. Customer maybe want to be involved day to day. Maybe there is a need for speed, so we have to build something, get something out within a month or two. Management wants the system that's working, not necessarily a lot of written artifacts. A lot of times, the less dependencies in this situation, the quicker we can deliver. Team members are able to do many different things, potentially all the different jobs that need to be done in order to get the work done. And finally, the market itself may be rapidly changing, and if it is, then you want to be able to change whatever quickly as well. In this environment, in the Agile environment, we also note that risks be welcomed because of the Agile approach. We can manage and reduce or eliminate risks on the go. So let the competition begin. Who's going to win in the waterfall approach versus the Agile? So let's take a look at a real nice healthcare example, ophthalmology. Let's say we're going to go build a clinic. And in building a clinic for ophthalmology, we would probably want requirements that are clear and settled. We want to have requirements that we see results. We would want quality over speed. So if we get better quality and we have to extend another week or two, probably not desired, but something that we'd make a decision to do that. Along the way, we probably would have people that want metrics and dependencies. Team members probably know just certain roles. The market really isn't going to change much. So let's go through this in a little bit more detail. So in essence, the practice is very straightforward. We have waiting rooms, fittings rooms. The sponsors are probably doctor groups or clinics. Safety is important, obviously to the staff and patients. Regarding management, you're going to have a doctor's group or a clinic who's going to do periodic status updates, but they're not going to be involved day to day. There's dependency on the clinic space itself. We have staff and support group that are going to be team members, as well as even the people building it are going to have specific roles. Ophthalmology as a practice moves slowly. So we're not going to have a lot of changes to our ophthalmology clinic over the months that we're building it, for example. And the risks we're looking at here that need to be minimized are basically risks around the standards in order to meet either government compliance or the health clinic standards in general. Doug, would you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, certainly. So I use this as an example because this is actually something we're doing at Dell Med. And yeah, we're developing a new clinic. And if you think about it, it's really hard to do waterfall when you're actually building physical structures. So this is something we're in the process of building out the space. A month ago, there was just dirt on the floor. We poured concrete and put walls up. So obviously you have to have those things in place before you can start adding TVs and monitors. So, you know, for facility type of projects that includes IT, Waterfall is kind of our choice for how we attack that type of a project.
Great. Now let's take a look at an Agile approach. So one of the other projects that Doug is working on is a COVID-19 tracing application. Requirements are basically uncertain. You know, you do know that you need to build a mobile app. You do know maybe some location mapping, symptoms, even the type of symptoms have to be changeable. The customer is going to want to be involved in this decision-making day to day. Need for speed is really critical that we build that quickly. Given the situation, it needs to be up within 3 to 4 weeks. In terms of management wanting to see a working application versus a whole bunch of paperwork is really a great example for this one. Basically, only dependencies they have would be just on gathering of data themselves, but they were under control of all the different pieces or integrations that were required. The development team in general, they hired a number of folks that could do multiple different things within the project. And this is something that's a rapidly changing market, that as we learn more about the virus, as we learn more about what needs to be tracked, that can be integrated over the different Agile cycles. And more or less risks to building this is welcome and can be integrated, you know, for every cycle that the team goes through. So do you want to add a little bit more to that, Doug?
Yeah, certainly. Again, this is another project that Dell Med is working on. And this was something that we partnered with a vendor that had an existing application for home monitoring. It wasn't COVID, obviously, related. It was something separate. And they basically repurposed their platform for monitoring of COVID patients. Within 3 weeks, we had an application that was deployed to patients that were testing at Dell Med. And there are new fields as we learn more about this virus that need to be added to the forms that we're required to fill out. So we basically have, for a period of time, we had sprint cycles that were 4 and 5 days, including weekends. That went on for about a month. We sort of gotten into a period of time where we're now just doing sprints every 2 weeks. We're constantly getting feedback from our users and our stakeholders that go into a backlog queue that are then prioritized based on the scale and complexity. So each task that comes in or each feature request that comes in is given a score anywhere from 1 to 9 based on the complexity of that score. And as a project team, we're allotted 12 points per sprint. So we have to figure out which features we like, make sure, adding up all those points for all those tasks equals around 12, submit that to the sprint, the developer gets going on it. And, sometimes it's okay to not get all the features into that release. It gets prioritized and put back into the backlog for the next release. So we deployed a solution in about 3 weeks. We're 2.5 months into it, and we've got a platform that's being used by over 1,000 patients and several hundred staff members. So there's no way we could have done that via Waterfall. We just didn't know what the needs were. We knew we needed something, so we had a vision. So in Agile, you have a vision board of what you kind of want, but those requirements don't come until you start getting feedback rapidly on the application. And the key to it was getting it deployed quickly and getting the minimum viable product in the hands of people to start using it and starting to get that feedback. So this has actually worked very well for us, this Agile approach.
Well, that's awesome. So I think it's some very two amazing examples given the context in which we're talking. So one of the things too we talked a little bit about is, can we use technology? So before we get started, I just want everybody to know that this is not just Microsoft centric, that we're going to go through and talk a little bit about Smartsheet as well as the Covansys tool as well, where they have Jira and other tools. But if we look at the MS Teams, if people aren't aware of it, here's kind of a little snapshot. They have like a chat and a Skype type abilities. As for some people that may not be aware, Skype is going away. And what Microsoft has done and spending, I think they spent $1 billion to buy Skype, they're integrating it into MS Teams. So I think they're looking for the MS Teams to be a ubiquitous platform within their team management system. One of the things you can do as well is you can make comments on the channel itself, kind of like you would in Facebook or any other sort of application. One of the things I think Doug wanted me to note here is even though there's some use of Microsoft Teams internal to the organization, the standard is Zoom in terms of communication.
Yeah, just for Dell Med.
The other thing too is they've integrated SharePoint. So people may have been really into SharePoint for a number of years. That SharePoint is still there, it's in the background, but you end up basically clicking on your project, clicking on this files, and you see basically a SharePoint type capability. It's very nice, very clean. And finally, they've also integrated the Kanban boards notion as well. So you're able to create different columns. In this case, there's a to-do, in progress, complete. You can add as many as you want. It's very simple, very easy. Did a nice job with that. And of course, it's infinitely configurable. You can actually create additional tabs, connect to Azure DevOps, connect to a document library, PowerPoint information, BI information. They've done a pretty nice job with this product. So the other thing I want to make sure that we're clear on is that Atlassian has a whole suite of products. We'll touch upon them in a minute, but they're also integrated and they perform basically the same way. So using Microsoft, because it's pretty easy and something I've been playing with for the last couple of years with a client that I'm with now, I'd like to kind of do some mapping. What we're looking at is Waterfall. We just talked about all the different categories that we want to manage within Waterfall. And some of the basic pieces is clear requirements in documents exist, the clear metrics, clear risk, clear role, clear change control in any third-party tools, such as Smartsheet, should be integratable. And so we can take over here the category and be able to match kind of to these different pieces that we're needing. As you can see, all the arrows kind of point to the area where we would see that. Then over here, we have the different technologies, SharePoint, chat, and Skype, comments. So clear requirements, obviously, are going to be managed within the SharePoint site. Clear metrics, we're going to be able to add tabs. Risk management will have cards and manage on Kanban boards. Role management will have a team and be able to manage our team through the channel. Change control, again, back to document management. We may have a process that includes using SharePoint. And finally, third-party tools. Obviously, there's ways to customize. So that's how do you, again, we're answering a question, how do you take existing technologies and integrate it into the waterfall approach? One of the things that we do know is there's no silver bullet for any particular project. So one of the challenges with waterfall is the tolerance for small errors is low. The tolerance for requirements change is low. Obviously, if you could build your full requirements and not have it change and not get any errors, you're going to have a perfect project that's right on time and under budget. But we know that that's not reality and that's not the world. So you have to adopt processes with these tools and techniques to handle that. Did you want to add anything to that, Doug?
We'll probably get further into the presentation. I want to talk a bit about how we actually are using Smartsheet, Jira, and Microsoft Teams combined.
Sure. Yeah, we'll get there in a couple. So on the Agile side, we again have the same category of items, and over here we have the same type of things, but instead of a huge requirements document, we have features, user stories, we have Scrum meetings, we have deliveries every 2 weeks, we do risk management, we do task management, board management, PO, and all that. So again, these items are managed. I put a few arrows for you to kind of look at. Within MS Teams, there's obviously the primary tool there is going to be using the Kanban board, using chat and Skype. So these first two are going to be critical. Even commenting on channels. SharePoint becomes a secondary type tool. And of course, if you're using any sort of Jira system and or DevOps from Microsoft, you'll be adding a tab, which will give you a view into dashboards and things like that. Tolerance for small errors. In this situation, we're dealing with Agile. If there's small errors, we just add them into the next cycle or hopefully fix them before we release. And it's high tolerance for change as well. So if a product owner decides something's more important, we just put it to the top of the list and it gets done. So on the Smartsheet side, what's interesting is that we can also transition from a Gantt chart view, as you can see, here's our typical waterfall Gantt chart view, to a Kanban board. So there is some mix going on around how Smartsheet works. And I do know that the school is really utilizing Smartsheet to a real great benefit. And I don't know, Doug, if you want to go into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, sure. So, well, I mean, we'll get to it in a just for this one, this is not something that's necessarily configurable. It is as easy as just changing a view and a drop down. So having the Gantt and then having the Agile status for backlog in progress, needs escalation and complete. It's really just a matter of pivoting. So this basically serves two masters. Whether you really like seeing things card style like a Kanban, or if you're just really like seeing the Gantt. Me particularly, I like both. I like seeing the Gantt because you can start seeing tasks, if they stack up on one another, you know you've got a constraint right there. Right? As a project manager, you're going to make sure you have those resources and they're not colliding. For a Kanban board, it's good for me to see pivoting by each team member what things are in their queue to get done and the status of it. So something like this that we've been using extensively, it's sort of helping us. Greg used the term hybrid. I know that term's kind of been used loosely, but we are sort of in a hybrid that seems to work for everybody, as we'll talk more about Jira, but having this feature of going from Gantt to Kanban to serve both masters has worked really well for us.
So again, we wanted to touch upon Atlassian, and I think there's a tool they have called Confluence, and that has a multiple different set of items as well. I spent about 5 years using Jira some years ago, as well as really like using Trello. Confluence was a great wiki. I did some amazing stuff a few years back on that. Love that tool. There's team calendars as well, and there's a multitude of different plugins for all these products that are just amazing. That's what kind of show here. So on to, I think, the other piece where we talked about Smartsheet and how that works. Doug, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, so this is sort of the secret sauce that we're sort of coming up. We didn't develop this. This is there's connectors, interfaces between Jira and Smartsheet. And we have some teams that are developing software or they're configuring software that for them, it works really well. Jira is an excellent tool for software development. I mean, I don't think you can even develop software anymore if you don't have an agile sort of system in place. So for configuring and developing software, Jira works well for them. Knowing that we have projects, so for example, our ophthalmology clinic, we're going to have software configuration as part of that project. So the nice thing is that we can actually ingest tasks, stories, epics from Jira into Smartsheet, and they can populate our Gantt chart, or we can give it our Gantt chart in Smartsheet to be a Kanban board. So it serves those masters. And the way I've sort of explained it, and as it's sort of a riddle that's not very clever and a joke that's not very funny, is what do project managers and dentists have in common? They get lied to. So if a dentist asks, how much do you floss? And you're like, oh, every day. In reality, maybe once a week. Project manager says, what's your percent complete?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, are you 50%? And a lot of times you get a response like, sure, I'm 50%. Because they don't know. I mean, they are working on it. They know they need to get it done by a certain point in time. And so it's sort of a non-value added conversation that's just rife with just stress. They don't really know exactly what percent complete because maybe their work down, maybe they just don't know. They know they need to get it done, but they're not basing their hourly work in a progression, in an agile sort of fashion. So what we're doing, and we actually just started doing this a few weeks ago, is even within our waterfall type projects, our tasks are going to be backlog, in process, and complete. As long as our team members know that you got to get it done at this point in time, we're not worried about if you're 10 or 20 or 30 or 40%. And so it kind of takes away that non-value added conversation. And we haven't really implemented it yet. This is something we just started doing with, like, I think maybe one project so far, but just the idea of getting rid of percent complete, because how many project managers have been in a situation where you've got a task that's 99% complete, and it's been like that for 3 weeks?
Right.
It's just a boring conversation.
Well, and two, we have to note in Agile, typically, if a use case or user story does not complete within the sprint, you don't get credit for story points, right? So there's an incentive for the team to add, to solve that problem or apply a little bit more effort to get something done within the time frame they've been given.
Yeah. Hey, at the end of the year, I'd love to report on how we're doing this. We literally just have one project right now that's currently ingesting these Jira epic stories into our Smartsheet. So I'd love to report how things are going, 6-7 months from now.
Right. So we always have problems in adoption. So we're painting a pretty picture here, but in reality, we have situations where if they're for Agile themselves, there's not really an understanding around the tolerance of errors or even the change in requirements. So there's some people that get burned, as they say, and you can maybe be in an environment where over time people are promoting Agile. Agile is going to be the greatest thing, and they start implementing it, and things don't quite work out the way they say it, and then you start hearing people say, don't say Agile. If you say Agile, you end up with career limiting moves. And so there's Agile that ends up being introduced over time, but you can't say it's Agile. You just start introducing all the tools and the techniques. So that's one of the interesting things that I've learned. Even within the waterfall side, there's a scope creep that we have, and tolerance for errors situation where we create a beautiful requirements document that's fully complete, and then as you find out, things change or you didn't know a whole lot. So there's potential errors, and so you don't manage the errors properly potentially, or you don't perform it correctly. And so we basically you know, a lot of times you'll find in a waterfall, they don't really define the scope coming out of the gate. So that's kind of what that one's about. And finally, we talked a little bit about hybrid approaches. So, you know, a lot of times the reality is, especially companies that are going, or groups that are going from a waterfall approach and are trying to adopt Agile, there's some sort of mix of both. And so you hear people saying, we're doing Agile, and you're standing in the hallway, and it's kind of, I like that photo there where the guy's kind of squinting and saying, I don't know, not sure if we're doing Scrum or Waterfall. So I think people maybe can relate to that. So one of the things too I wanted to point out is that a lot of times PMI has been viewed as a waterfall-oriented organization. And as you'll know, I have an Agile certified practitioner against my name. And this is something I took a number of years ago. I think it was 2014. And so I was able to take a class that taught from PMI, that taught Agile, all the approaches and how to do it. And I've been doing Agile for even longer than that. So coming up on more than 10 years. But one of the things that I was concerned about is PMI and how they've kind of been waterfall centric. And so that's changing pretty rapidly. The latest PMBOK, or the latest PMP test and ACP tests, obviously maybe ACP is Agile, but the PMP has a lot more Agile notions in it. They're also producing a lot more articles about this. Swimming Up the Waterfall is a great article, Agile Processes in a Waterfall World. Really recommend that as a resource. Again, we'll be sending this PowerPoint out after the meeting. Blending Agile and Waterfall, the keys to successful implementation. The reality is, for larger projects, there's going to be maybe components that are Waterfall and components that are Agile. You have to be able to manage both. Agile project management and the PMBOK guide. So it talks a little bit about how the PMBOK is integrating with Agile techniques. Is there anything else you want to add to that before we get towards the end here, Doug?
So far, so good. This is great.
All right. So one of the things we talked a little bit about too is that, you know, within this world, I think we're seeing the healthcare industry growing. You can say hi to my son. So why don't you go back in there? Okay. There's about 50 people watching now. We have I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the nature of working remote.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Kids and dogs. Yes.
So in the programming world, you know, the people in that world kind of live in a certain way. I'm kind of poking fun here with you know, what the society thinks we do versus what my friends versus what I actually do, and I think it's true even in healthcare, right? Doctors, nurses, you know, what my friends think I do versus, you know, what I think I can do versus what I'm actually doing. I like the one, what the doctors think I do. That's kind of a cute thing as well. So anyway, but I think if we can start to look at each other and kind of see each other's worlds, we can kind of work together and realize if we come back and say, hey, this is a waterfall project, I think the healthcare folks are probably a bit more comfortable with that. So I think there's some ease with that. But if we come back and say we'll do an Agile, that there's reasons why we're doing Agile, and that's important that we communicate that. So with that, here's some of my information, just kind of sharing that we do have a meetup that we're pulling together with PMI, and we also have other information. I provided my email address, my LinkedIn, and my phone number. So if anybody, I'm pretty good on email and as well as phone calls. So if anybody wants to call and talk, that'd be great. So I don't know if you have anything else to add, or if we want to just open it up to questions.
I think based on that last slide, Greg, I've noticed, especially on my my Agile project that I'm on, that the healthcare workers, they really, I mean, if you think about it, software is one of these things where you can, you know, explain how it will look. Maybe you've got vaporware or PowerPoints, but unless they can actually use it, it's hard for them to put their critical thinking hats on to see to give you feedback.
Right.
what I mean is getting that, the Agile, the minimum viable product in their hands. It's not perfect. It may have bugs, but they can start using it.
Right.
I think everybody's maybe seen, not everybody, but perhaps you've seen with the cost and change curve. So basically, if a change is introduced late in the project, it's very expensive.
Right.
Change introduced at the beginning of the project, well, that's Agile. Let's just constantly, getting those changes as early as possible into the products, and not just changes, but features. So I think a lot of people and users tend to gravitate towards getting something in their hands to start getting that feedback loop started as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure in terms of the healthcare community overall, if there is enough of these Agile projects out there that the doctors, nurses, and staff are used to, getting something that isn't complete. Because I do know a lot of people, they hear something's coming, they're told kind of what it'll do, and so when they get it, they expect it to do everything. And so I think one of the most important things that we can do to help the industry is, as things become more information oriented, as more devices have more data, that the information infrastructure people are really working hard to, one, organize that data, two, provide data that is effective and something they can actionably do, provide interfaces that are easy to use. And a lot of times you spend a whole career just doing your development and doing your effort. You don't quite have the clearest understanding of what exactly the nurses are doing, or the doctors, or other staff. And so that feedback, getting stuff in their hand, is really a learning process for a lot of the information folks.
Yeah.
And the learning process is really critical, and that communication back and forth. And like you said, getting that product as soon as possible in their hands so that we can really learn what it is that they're really needing and being able to adjust to it.
Yeah, and I've seen it firsthand. So I called our core team for our COVID-19 tracing product. We've got a doctor, we've got a nurse, we've got an epidemiologist. And I mean, they've taken to Agile like a fish to water. When I explain, okay, we only have this many points in this sprint, and here's all the tasks, and we have to prioritize the tasks, and then make sure that the point total equals whatever the allotment is. They really understand, okay, what are the most important things to do, and what's the work needed by the developers to do it. They totally get it. I mean, these people that, they're obviously not programmers, they're nurses, epidemiologists, and doctors, but for them to start thinking about, okay, we need this one now, and it's this much work, and then, okay, that one I can wait for the next sprint in 2 weeks, and that one I actually can wait even further. They've just taken to it so well. So it's just been my feedback on it.
Great.
I'll take some questions from the audience. You go ahead and type that into the Zoom group chat if you've got any questions. There's a couple of comments in here, but I don't see any specific questions. So, or I think if you raise your hand, I can unmute you too. I don't see any hands raised. Can you paste the meetup link?
Yeah, I'll do that. Hold on a second. Keep going.
On the chat. The other thing I'd like to welcome everybody to do is reach out to Greg. You have his email on topics that you'd like to see for future lunch and learns. The idea with this, we obviously had to pivot to Zoom, but the idea was to have to welcome people from the Austin PMI to Dell Medical School in person. We started a standing lunch and learn earlier this year. We've sort of partnered with Austin PMI. Whenever we get back to normal, we'd love to host you. But until then, Zoom seems to be working pretty well. Are there any other questions? Feel free to post it in there, or you can also post ideas for future lunch and learns on the chat too. We'll compile those and review, and then we'll bring in some more high quality speakers.
Yeah, we really want to see people provide some recommendations. I mean, at some point, Doug and I are going to have to do what we think is best, and maybe some of you might have higher priority ideas. So One of the things I was thinking, Doug, maybe we had talked a little bit about dashboards. Maybe that would be something to try to do next month.
Yes. Yeah, Smartsheets obviously our platform, and we are actively soliciting feedback from not just, from stakeholders. So those be IT stakeholders, clinical stakeholders to see, what they want and the series of what they want. And what we've kind of come to an understanding is that, we want to have what we call for being, front page. What's the first thing that they want to see as far as metrics? And then if they're curious about a project, they can then scroll down and actually click into a project and go to that project dashboard. So starting with a portfolio dashboard of metrics, and then they go to a project dashboard of metrics, which is obviously a little bit more granular level. So this is a topic we're actively working on right now to make sure we dial it in. And the nice thing is we don't need developers to configure Smartsheet for us. We've got a brilliant Smartsheet admin, Bretta Candelaria, who's on this session, that I kind of joke that Smartsheet to her is like playing a video game. So if we have a conversation about something, she gets all excited and goes to work on coming up with something that's viable. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. We can make that change too. So you might seem like I've drank the Smartsheet Kool-Aid, but the fact is that when I came to Dell Med, I was sort of given an opportunity to say, just pick a tool. And I've used Jira, I've used Microsoft Project, I've used Trello, all these different things. And what I noticed was Dell Med already had sort of a platform of licenses on Smartsheet, and people loved it. It was kind of like, try and take it from my cold dead hands. And actually, I didn't have a preference. The way that they were using it was a lot of different ways how they were managing projects. And Smartsheet had a module which we purchased that it's actually what I call like a PMO in a box. They had all the standard process tools, templates that you can implement, and automated dashboards already done that we can customize. So it was just a good fit for us. And before we even started the implementation, we came up with, I call them, Scrum stories, basically requirements saying, we need a product that can do this. As a portfolio manager, I need a product that can do this. And then project managers on my team saying, I want a project that does this. We had other stakeholders that say, I want a project tool or dashboard to do this. And as we went through the project, we just sort of checked those off as we were going through and implementing Smartsheet. So it works for us. Other tools work maybe equally as well, but we already had sort of a good base of users that were clamoring to get a Smartsheet license. So it's kind of like, well, they've got that, they like it. Smartsheet has a module that we can buy that does this for us, automated, and easy to use. So again, I feel like I sound like a salesperson, but it's just what's worked for us. I have no vested interest in Smartsheet, but it's just what works for us. And then the Jira integration, obviously, that's a big thing too that we just started uncovered. Works well for both teams.
It looks like we've got a couple of questions we might be able to field real quick. There's a couple votes for the dashboard, definitely, which is great. There's somebody who's transitioning to from technology to healthcare. Certainly, obviously, any healthcare experience does help, but depending on the project, if you know something that's valuable and get selected by a recruiter and there's a slot and you pass the interviews. Doug, you want to talk a little bit about that? What type of people do you hire? Maybe that's a good question.
Yeah. Well, certainly, healthcare experience is I won't say required, but it's prioritized. But at the same time, I have to say people that come from other industries. So for example, the software development industry, if they're coming from that, they bring that expertise with them. And to a certain degree, you can, sort of explain what the healthcare process is. So, I mean, it's really, honestly, at the end of the day, I tend to hire for capabilities, personality. As project managers, we have to have that level of grit. So everything else you can sort of train and certify. With people on my team that are going through PMI to get their PMP certification, that's stuff you can teach. And if you're open to learning, how healthcare works in general, that's something that's also quite teachable. But it is nice to be able to hire someone with experience in healthcare. at least for Dell Medical from my perspective.
And what I'm hearing, I mean, there's a question about some other tools as well. Whatever tool your company is adopting, you know, I think I'm a get in, find out what's working for people, and improve it. But getting in and trying to push something out and push something that you like is probably a more difficult place to be.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was, you know, put the tool aside. Like I said, before we implemented Smartsheet, we just said, whatever the tool is, it needs to do these things. And then, you know, survey the market, see what's available. And once you start implementing it, make sure you're checking off those boxes and that product is meeting what you forth. Don't expect the tool to dictate your processes. So you should have your processes in place before you select the tool. At Dell Med, we just, the project management office was brand new as early as September when I joined. So I was in the process of developing the PMO, developing processes at the same time and implementing a tool. So I kind of had to do two at the same time in lockstep. But it's helpful to have good processes and layer technology on top of that rather than to have technology drive your processes.
Yeah, and I do have a situation where there's a tool they bought a few years ago, and it's been clearly not exactly what they need. And so I'm not attached to the tool per se, but I do want to provide them with the right information. So I'm actually looking at vendors that help do that. Gartner is the one that I'm talking to, and so we're coming up with a short list of vendors to look at. So I did a bunch of research and pulled down information, and so we went from 4, now we're kind of looking at 2. One in particular we like because it really meets their needs, and I'm working with the architect to do that. So some of our next steps there is to just buy like a little license to bring it in and kind of go through our use cases. So we don't want to make the mistake before where people kind of fell in love with the product, but it turned into something that was maybe you would put in a place that makes airplanes because you don't want the plane to fall out of the sky. What we're doing is more business oriented. So it was a complete overkill for what we're trying to do. So that it's all about that. Getting your stakeholders to see the value and then delivering on that value. Well, it looks like we've got a few great questions. I've captured most of that.
Yeah, there's one question about anybody using a tool called Crow. I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah. And there's a couple votes for dashboard.
Here's a question: how do you handle large requirement changes in an Agile environment? So it's dependent upon how many changes, what's the capacity of that team. So whereas I said, if you have all these Agile tasks in your backlog, and maybe you've got 50 things in your backlog and you're prioritizing it, you're also saying, well, this task, it's a point value of 1, it's an easy task, versus that task, it's a point value of 9, because that's a lot more complicated, involves lots of different teams. If you start getting tasks that are, 25, well, you should probably break those into smaller tasks. So it's really breaking down the tasks, we call maybe requirements, into smaller tasks that are manageable, and being able to prioritize those and fit them into what can be accomplished in a 2-week sprint. So when I think of large requirement changes, I think of volume of changes. And really it's a matter of what's the capacity of your team. So every Agile project, when it's initiated, has like a vision board. I know there's different techniques, but a vision board is the stakeholders, people that are initiating the Agile process, the ones that have the money, saying, okay, this is what I think I need. Here's your budget, go. And, and let me know every 2 weeks how things are going.
Yeah, and what's interesting.
Down to, if there's a lot of requirements changes, maybe you need to beef up your team. You need to go back to the stakeholder and saying, well, we can't get by on 12 points per sprint. We need 20 points, so we need more team members.
Right, and in terms of Agile as well, a lot of times those tasks should roll up to a user story, then that should roll up to a feature, and in some places if they're building a big enough application, we'll use the notion of epics. So, when you say a large requirements change, I mean, would we say, entire epic has changed? So hopefully you haven't, if that's the case, you haven't actually done some of that. If you have that sunk cost, you got to throw it away, right? If you're about to do it, then that's not a problem, because you can go in and make all those changes and put them in the backlog and organize them. A team just marches along doing the work that they're given. Well, the other thing too that I've seen is that sometimes a sprint starts, and then the team is a few days into it, and maybe half a week, maybe even a full week in a 2-week sprint, and then the product owner wants to change the requirement. Well, at that point, you have to make a decision. Do you stop the team and restart the sprint, or do you let them finish and try to augment what you've done? What we don't want to do is to be in the middle of sprints changing requirements. That's typically not recommended. So anyway, that's my experience.
Has this been helpful for everybody? Show of hands in the Zoom. We got a thumbs up, 2 thumbs up, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's like a whack-a-mole on the gallery view. Great. Well, thanks everybody. We can end early. Again, if you've got ideas or things that you're curious about that you want to see in future Lunch and Learns, let Greg know. You have his contact information, and he can pass those along to me, and we can prioritize the next what the next session will be. Or if you're an expert in a certain area, let us know as well. We'd love to have you as a speaker if I think that's of interest.
Absolutely, yeah. I just don't want to be having Doug or myself or the both of us and a small group of people talking. This is intended to be a community, and if you have a expertise in a certain area you'd like to share, I think, Doug, you want to make sure that it's a project specific.
Yeah, I'd like for it to be project specific, not maybe a healthcare topic or an industry topic. It's really, topics are fine to relate back to, but as long as it's sort of based on something, a project management tool or technique, and then relating it obviously, to healthcare. We want to keep those barriers up, or those rails up.
Well, thanks. This has been great for me. I really appreciate everybody coming and seeing it. We've put a little bit of effort to make this happen, so it's nice to have people.
Yeah, we had a great turnout. I think we had 55, peaked at 55 people. So thanks everybody. We will let you know when the next session will be. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.